Good afternoon. This is Dr. Princess, and I'm going to do a video. Today's topic, haven't quite chosen the topic yet. Maybe it'll come to me. But I'm going to discuss what the purpose of the video is, and then I'm going to discuss the purpose of my research. Who are they and who are we? So the purpose of the video is to provide some level of peace, consolation, and clarity on who they are. What is the purpose of my research? I could say it is to contribute to videos like this, but it also contributes to my own serenity and understanding of myself and how I fit in the world around me. The purpose of the research is also to de-escalate some of the tensions that are going on in the world right now. Very real. They're not imaginative. The purpose of my research is to provide clarity to the folks who want it. So if you want to understand what's going on in the world around you, if you have already snapped out of the illusion or the delusion that everything is going to be okay, this video is for you. If, however, you are okay with the status quo, you're okay with living in a state of flux and allowing the news to be your motivation, your engine, your everything, this video is not for you. For the daring souls who truly want to get to the bottom line of what is going on an international or global level in the world right now. And a small caveat, maybe a large one to some of you who are atheists. If you are agnostic, atheist, you question if God exists, you don't believe in God at all, this video is also not for you, because none of the research that I've done is independent completely of my philosophy on the existence of life itself as it relates to the creator of all living things, as I believe it to be God the Father, the creator of life. So none of it will make any sense, and it will all be dejected if everything you look at today is an independent event. Nothing will make sense. None of my connections will connect to you because you don't believe in God at all. So you can go ahead and click off of this video. Now, for those of you who stayed, let's talk about who are they. And you might be asking me, hey, Doc, how can you say that there will be any consolation, any peace, any serenity in today's world? Well, it's simple. I know who they are. Now, a lot of historians who may or may not even identify as Christian, coming from different religious backgrounds, acknowledge certain principles in the Bible because they have a religious background of some sort, be it Jewish, Christianity, Muslim, or / Islam. Those religions in particular acknowledge who they are. They are the sons or the descendants of Japheth. Who is Japheth? This is Bible 101. Bible 101 teaches us that there was a flood over 3,000 years ago, if not more than that. After such flood, there were only 8 people who lived. Those 8 people were commanded to repopulate the earth. Now, I'm not sitting reading scriptures or anything like that. I might even be considered rusty to some people, but these are just some of the facts that I believe. I don't question the 5 books or the 10 books of the Torah. I don't question if Moses wrote the books. I don't question if God exists. So I'm going to continue. 8 people were actually commanded to repopulate the earth. 3 of those 8 people were the sons of Noah. They were Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Now, I'm not going to come and tell you that I know all the answers to every historical question. I'll be the first one to tell you that my research is inconclusive on some aspects of Ham and Shem, okay? My research is conclusive just as much as it was when I was a teenager on who the sons of Japheth are. So I don't have my study Bible right now. It's in a storage unit. However, it is loaded with some small print that discusses different people who were known to be either Scandinavian, mountain people, the Caucasoid, etc. They were explained as a subset or a different group. Initially, they were just in small print. Now that's important to me because I've read the Bible front to back 5 times. And my first time reading the Bible, that was a shocker to me. They were in fine print. Here's what I want to highlight, however. While they are in fine print, I will, at this point, later in my journey as a Christian, I will conclude their origin based on the story, based on Genesis 10:11. Their origin is Japheth, the oldest son of Noah, to my understanding, traveled north from a place that is almost unidentifiable because historians are still arguing over where were they. They argue over where was the Tower of Babel, and I will be honest with you all and tell you that unfortunately, even as recent as last night, there were 7 different potential places for the Garden of Eden. So as a person who loves the Bible, who understands the Bible, I understand the other side of it now. I understand that there are potentially inconsistencies, not in the Word of God, but in the maps that humans have attempted to attach to the book. I used the map primarily when I was younger to understand where this stuff was happening, only to learn now that there are so many questions because so many people have created modifications to the map. But here's what they haven't modified, and this is what they don't disagree on. They never disagree that the sons of Japheth became what we know as the Caucasian group, the group of people which initially really represented countries like Italy, France, Greece, and later on, some people would say, no, these other countries were created or founded first. The mountain people were in fine print, so I'm going to go and say later on, the mountain people, because from the origin, they began their journey, and as they continued scattering out further, okay, places like Norway, Finland, Sweden, the Norwegian population, as well as Denmark, Greenland, these were considered the mountain people. Adjacent to Norway is Germany, to the east of it. But I say that because understanding the landmarks and knowing something about the maps is very important. Later on, our knowledge of the maps may be questioned, which is what has happened now. But let's focus on the origination of this thing. We might not know the absolute origin of the Garden of Eden. Initially, my understanding was that it was in present-day Iraq. But there were 4 parts of the river which encircled this place called the Garden of Eden, which means there were 4 different rivers. And they're listed in this order: Pison, Gushan, Tigris, and Euphrates. Understanding that later on the rivers Tigris and Euphrates will be mentioned throughout Scripture, and that is where present-day Iraq is located. Not understanding that there were 2 additional rivers And it took a collective of 4 rivers for the Garden of Eden to be described. So the argument is, was it really Iraq, or was it Ethiopia, or was it Yemen, or was it Saudi Arabia, or was it Sudan, or was it Djibouti, or was it Eritrea, or was it Turkey? Once I saw that researchers are arguing over where the Garden of Eden is actually located, then I understood better why there's so much division. Now, I already knew about the origin of the division in what we call the present day, quote unquote, Middle East. I already knew that there are supposed to be wars and rumors of wars near what is the alleged Holy Land. But it took me to review what has happened to different parts of Africa and Asia in particular, Egypt and Israel, current day, quote unquote, Israel, what they call Israel today. It took me to review and go back hundreds of years to realize that there's some parts of what we believe which have already occurred. One of the sons of Japheth is Ashkenaz, the current present-day Jew. No, I am not a Hebrew Israelite or any of that. I'm just going based on maps and Bible. Go to Genesis 10 or 11. Argue with the Bible, not me. And no, I'm not saying the King James Version is the only version. As a matter of fact, I've been reading the Septuagint and the Torah lately because there are some things that are inconsistent in the King James Version. So that's for the people who want to argue with me about this, okay? I have been reading what the Greeks have written. I have been reading what the Hebrew wrote, because sometimes there are inconsistencies, and I do have the interlinear Bible, if you were wondering. I have the Bible that includes the Torah, the Septuagint, as well as the, quote, King James Version. And I can read them separately and then pray to ask for revelation on understanding of what is going on. So if you understand what is going on biblically, then you understand what's going on in the world. So without even knowing exactly where the Garden of Eden is, but me understanding that it's in a general vicinity somewhere between Africa and Asia, I understand why there are so many wars in that area. I understand that there are pieces of land over there which are only called a country based on random geographical borders rather than actual landmass amount and the people who used to own the land. And I also understand that part of the world has been under surveillance since the very beginning. Now, those are just me. That's coming to the table with activation of prior knowledge, which is a skill in education. You have to know something about this to have an intelligent conversation. Now, let's continue. This part of the world, which has always been under surveillance since the beginning of man's life as we know it. By whom, you ask? Because we didn't have this many people. We didn't have millions and billions. It was under surveillance by God. This part of the world was under surveillance by the Creator himself. This part of the world was under surveillance to ensure that certain people got a certain outcome. That's as simple as I can make it. Now let's continue in who are they? And I can tell you all right now, you have to come back for the next episode to get a full answer on who are we, because my research is inconclusive. I can't tell you even who the talented 10 are. I can't tell you if we are the sons of Ham or the sons and daughters of Shem. I'm not sure, because too many people who have been involved in the writing of the actual Bible itself have argued over this. So I'm not doing that today. But what I will discuss with you is who are the sons of Japheth. Japheth moved north from an arbitrary point, which we could call Babel, the Tower of Babel, Babel, however you want to say it. And yes, people do argue where was Nineveh, where was Nimrod, okay? Nimrod was the grandson of Ham, who went to a certain somewhat ambiguous location and created Nineveh, as well as the Tower of Babel. And when it got too close to heaven, that's when God disrupted the entire situation, because humans were building brick by brick a staircase to get closer and closer to actually God's throne. And when they got too close, God was like, we got to disrupt this. Let's confuse them. Let's confuse their languages and scatter them. And that's exactly what happened. And humans as a race have been scattered ever since. So let's go with that is the beginning of this exodus in terms of this migration from the point of reference, which was Babel at that point. So after these people leave, these are Noah's sons. Japheth goes north, Shem goes east, Ham goes west. West would be allegedly present-day Africa or deeper into it, no matter where exactly the location of origin is. West would take you straight into a deeper part of Africa. East would take you into, quote, Asia. There was no Middle East at that point. And then north would take you to Europe, okay? The Middle East is not a continent. You're either in Africa, Asia, or Europe. That's what we know from learning the 7 continents. Okay, now that we got the geography out of the way, let's talk about who the sons of Japheth were. No, I do not have my Bible in front of me. I can't go off and list them all. But there are some names that stand out. Gomer, Ashkenaz, Gog, Magog. My understanding, I probably need to read a little bit more, but my understanding is those include places like Russia. Those include places like what would be considered the Norwegian lands, or the islands that are near the peninsula of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. Those 4 areas. So those are included in some of the areas that were in the small print where these people actually lived once they left the, quote, Tower of Babel. That's kind of the extent of understanding of where did the sons of Japheth originate, okay, or from whence did they come? Well, everyone came from the same location, the Tower of Babel, and then one son went north, one son went east, and one son went west. I'm not going to explain who the sons of Shem and Ham are at this point. I'm going to focus on the sons of Japheth. Many people will argue that each of Noah's sons, essentially in some sort of order, were able to reign or have a humongous empire at one point. Many people argue that the sons of Ham, or the Cushites, so-called the Cushites, they ended up starting in Egypt and continued to go west, and they would go on to have what's known as the Egyptian Empire, all this gold and etc., so on and so forth. Many folks argue that that was the extent of the reign of people of color. Well, people who are known today as being from some sort of diaspora, whatever that means at this point, because if you look at it like this, everybody is from the diaspora, but whatever. Now, the sons of Shem allegedly go east and settle somewhere in Asia, okay? As time goes on, the descendants of Noah's sons continue to procreate and populate the earth in their respective areas. Ham's son, Canaan, everyone knows the story. They try to explain this is the reason for slavery. This was even in my research paper in undergrad. This was my understanding of who Ham was. I'm thinking at that point as an undergraduate, taking this class called the Bible and Literature, that the African American must have been the descendant of the son of Ham. Well, we're going to handle some of that in the next video, but you go east and you deal with the descendants of Shem. You're in Asia. People argue that the Asians had time to rule the earth in their own time frame. They had the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire. This was the time of their reign. And they close the book there in terms of these different history books, and they move on to the sons of Japheth. The alleged sons of Japheth, well, we know if you read the Bible, they went north, so these are the European settlers, okay? They continue to procreate in their respective lands, and allegedly this is who is ruling the earth right now, but I don't really have to say allegedly. If you live in the United States or anywhere in the world, because China just dropped a video on our current president dropping tariffs on China, 25%. It doesn't matter where you live. If you do business with the country called the quote-unquote United States of America, you know what's going on right now. And if you're a Christian, you should understand or see that there is a great power alliance that has been formed, but the people who are in power look like the descendants of the son of Japheth. Yes, I did research on these two men. Donald Trump, his father is from Germany. He was an immigrant. Elon Musk, I went back up to 15 generations, and I can tell you, let me go back. Let me actually flip my book so I can tell you what I found on him. Okay. Elon Musk has two parents, Errol Musk and May Musk, and they are still alive. He had two sets of grandparents and two sets of great-grandparents, like everyone else who's lived that we know of, except Adam and Eve and their kids. Everyone else has great-grandparents, great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great. So we're going to go back we're going to go forward, rather, and I'll tell you the number correlates to how many -2. So the number -2 correlates to how many great-greats that Elon Musk has and where the origin was. So if you go back to one set of grandparents or one set of parents, I'm not going to break down like which grandparent, but I will say that his great-grandmother on his father's side is where most of his recorded history past 7 or 8 generations still continues to go backwards. On the father's side, that father's mother, so his great-grandmother, his paternal great-grandmother is where most of the history continues past 8 generations. So if you hear me say like 6 or 7 generations, go back to this location, that's either the mother's side of the family or the paternal grandfather side of the family. Harry Musk, his generations only go back so far. So Elon Musk, it goes back, if we follow the lineage of his paternal grandparents, one of them goes back, the paternal grandmother goes back 12 generations to the Netherlands. Most of them go back to England, though, about 8 generations. But I wasn't satisfied with England, so I had to keep going. England goes back 8 generations rather to the paternal grandmother. We start getting some answers when we go over to the other side of the family, not the Musk side, but the paternal grandmother's other side of the family. That is why he says he's from South Africa, okay, is because they did start about maybe 4 great-grandparents ago, maybe in the 1800s rather, looks like. They started in Cape Colony, South Africa, okay? Now that is his paternal great-grandmother. They go back to the 1800s, around 1819. They go back to Cape Colony, South Africa. That's where the great-grandparents met. They migrated, they met there and all of this. But from where did they come, you ask? Because that's not on the genetic chart. But what is on the genetic chart is the Musk last name goes back 8 generations to England. And then the other side of the family, like his mother's side of the family, goes back to Iceland, 6 generations, Scotland, 7 generations. And then if we go back to the paternal side, not the paternal great-grandfather, but the paternal great-grandmother, that's when you get your answers. They went to South Africa from the Netherlands 12 generations ago, or 9 generations ago, and you can trace it back 12 generations to the 1600s. You can trace them back to Belgium 12 generations to the 1600s, and you can trace them back to France 13 generations in 1581. So primarily, his oldest lineage comes from the Netherlands, France, and Belgium. I just needed something to come together a little more than that, so I got to digging on where these people originated. From where did people come who call themselves the Netherlands, okay? And that is where we get into areas that are called Holland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. Okay, you got to go back to the Middle Ages. 476 is the fall of the Roman Empire. People who try to trace back the lineage of the folks who call themselves Norwegian or from the Netherlands, they have to go back to from where did these people originate? Well, there's not a whole lot of debate. It's just a lot of understanding that a lot of fighting occurred in Europe in the Middle Ages. There was a lot of rising and falling within Europe's empires, including but not limited to the Vikings of the 9th century. You go back previous to that, and you have either Germanic leaders or Roman Empire type leaders. In 410, that was the end of the Roman Empire. Well, somewhere between 410 and 476. They say that ancient Germans are somewhere between 70 BC and 70 AD. The Great Migration period, according to the Roman Empire, but based on research, was between the 5th and the 15th century, or especially from 400 to 800. So between 400 and 800, that is where the Great Migration occurred. The Middle Ages covers everything between the 5th and the 15th century. And it included nothing but civil wars where people throughout Europe dealt with things like the bubonic plague or the Black Death, changes in the middle class, the rise and fall of the Franks, the rise and fall of the Roman empires, and every other empire which happened after that was because people would argue Rome fell, so then that gave way for the next group of leaders. And later on, the era of the Vikings, between 793 and somewhere 900 and something. But I say that because it's very important to know who these people are, from where they originated, and what they represent. These people represent war. You're trying to figure out what's going on with your Social Security check. These people have always divided and conquered. There is nothing new under the sun. That's in Ecclesiastes. I don't remember exactly which verse, but that's in Ecclesiastes. So if there's nothing new under the sun, and these people represent war, what do you expect they will represent now? As we continue to see headline after headline and devastation after devastation to people's resources, their retirement, their insurance, their home value, as we see question after question on what will happen with the U.S. government as a whole. Will there ever be a, quote, United States of America ever again? What we should understand is these people who originated, initially they left the Tower of Babel, but they settled in Europe, began fighting as soon as they settled. Maybe not as soon as they settled, but there's a lot of proof that to take the next person's land or resources, there was a lot of theft, there was a lot of violence, a lot of bloodshed, a lot of international war. It wasn't all civil war. It wasn't just South England versus North England. And a lot of effort went forth for the treaties that occurred during the Middle Ages between the century 1000 all the way to 15 or 1600. People finally got tired of so much death all around. But before you post a video crying about what Elon Musk is doing, what Donald Trump is doing, I can't believe this, we need to protest that, please understand, these people have always represented theft, war, and the lack of unity. This is not to say that countries throughout Asia and Africa have not had civil war. They have. But they are not from whence war began. They are not the first known agents of war and chaos. They apparently, allegedly had limited resources where the land shared between Shem and Ham, however it is shared, although it doesn't appear to be shared very well today, was marked as the different parts of the world filled with resources, including but not limited to gold, the best rivers and bodies of water, where vegetation was beyond flourishing. North of the Tower of Babel, one would think that it was desolate, although we know now that there was lots of resources north of the Mediterranean Sea, on the west of it, where present-day England is located, and essentially where the Netherlands were able to thrive. It was based on their water resources. Then you have landlocked countries come into those areas. The DNA is shared, not just amongst all human beings, but if we break it down, it is shared on a micro level within people who are from the same group of countries. We don't all have to look alike to know that we are similar in some way, shape, or fashion. There's enough phenotypical markers that differentiate us for us to see, okay, we look different from the next person. But that's not what I want to highlight here. The purpose of the video is to highlight not how people look, because superiority of looks is what created racism. This video is to highlight how people act. And if we pay attention to how people are acting, they are doing exactly what they are supposed to do. Imagine that Antichrist, or any human being or leader who doesn't really follow closely to God. Imagine the leaders who are the reason, in many cases, the sole reason for their country's fall, the fall of the empire in which they used to lead. A lot of it is arrogance, dominance, ego, pride. There's a scripture that says pride comes before a great fall. Why are we not looking at what's happening, although it may appear to be complete control, domineering? It could cause great anxiety on one hand. We should look at this as a sign of who these people are. They are showing you this is who they are. They're showing you their heritage. They're also showing you that they are not the Gentiles who are amongst harmony with others, okay? The Gentiles who create harmony, they don't act like this. Creating and sowing division, stirring up strife amongst different groups of people. This type of behavior is a sure sign to the Christian that these people are showing you who they are, and they represent a group of, quote, leaders who are not after God's heart, who couldn't care less about his people, and who simply just don't care about any of the mandates of godly leadership. So don't get outraged when you see things on the news. Don't lose your mind when you see that certain benefits are taken away, that you're working this hard and maybe your 401k has been threatened. Accept this for what it is. If you're a Christian, your belief has to be in more than just the financial resources that you have built. At this point, you really need to rely on God for your understanding, and you must have faith to know that even if this is the reign or the leadership and dominance of the sons of Japheth, it too will end. Do we know how, when, or in what manner? No. But we know that God is bigger than our problems and our leadership. Economists may tell you your dollar isn't going to really have that much weight pretty soon, and this is why they're freaking out. While we have every logical reason to lose our minds, we have to stay grounded in the faith right now. Now more than ever, must we look to the original document, even if it has been altered, which I have admitted could be the case. When it comes to maps, we must look at the document for the instruction, because the instruction doesn't change no matter how many maps people have altered or attempted to alter. And ultimately, God's people will know who they are, and it does not matter what map is available or unavailable. So that is the conclusion of my video. I had a guest I would like to bring on in case he would like to say anything.
Thank you, Dr. Princess. This is the enforcer here. I just feel like I just went to school. There was just so much that I just learned, obviously about the historical and biblical relevance of the past and how that's impacted what is going on today. So I appreciate you just doing the work and carrying the labor of bringing the information to us so that we can understand, and even further doing our own research, if you will, to further understand those different connections. So I appreciate that.
Not a problem. That is what we are here to do. I'm glad you got something out of it. Did you have anything you wanted to add about what you see in the news as an American, or whether or not you feel people should be afraid? I know you're also a Christian. Like, what are your beliefs on, even if it's just brief, what are your thoughts and beliefs on how people should move right now?
I think that people should just move with a sense of vigilance and a sense of hyper awareness and putting things through a filter, because there's a lot happening very fast. For example, if we take a look at the news cycle, that's one thing that a lot of news outlets from like NPR to NBC, ABC, you name it, the one thing that they're saying is that the news cycle is going a lot quicker than it has in prior years. And that's due to, I mean, if we're going to use President Trump, every day or every other day, it's a new story. So it's keeping them on their toes. I was listening to one podcast was saying, oh, we would have talked about this last week, but 15 other things happened. So we have to ask ourselves, essentially, why is this happening? And more importantly, how can I stay vigilant so that I don't get caught up in the smoke screens, which unfortunately a lot of this stuff is, are smoke screens. And so that's why I say definitely be hyper vigilant, be hyper aware, ask yourself, is this something that I should be paying attention to? Or is there something else that's not being stated that I need to focus on? As we move, we're going to have to block a lot of stuff out. And unfortunately, we're in the era of social media where stuff is in our face 24/7. So we just have to do our own due diligence, including the filters in place to make sure that what we see is actually what we need to be seeing, and that we don't get caught up. And in some cases, people use smoke screens as a tactic to deploy and implement their own personal plans, which in some cases may not benefit you or I.
I agree with that. I couldn't agree with that more. One of the things that my guy and I were discussing was exactly that this past weekend. The fact that, and I can't remember the terminology that he used, but the fact remains that what the enforcer just told you all, some things that are being broadcast, news anchors might feel overwhelmed, the news cycle is going faster, but let's be clear, they are just puppets to whatever the assignment is in the newsroom. Even they don't know what is worth reporting, what is not worth reporting. So it is our responsibility at this point as citizens of the world, not just of the US, because again, other countries are reporting on this country because of all of the things which are occurring simultaneously, and there are international economics behind a lot of stuff too, but maybe we'll discuss some of these things like BRICS, etc., in a different episode. But I say that because a lot of what has been broadcast is a smokescreen, and a lot of changes are occurring, which do affect a lot of people. But if you realize that the leadership doesn't really care about the individual, the person who's affected, the policies that they are changing, but the outrage that happens as a result of that, that's kind of the expected reaction. That gives enough ammo to move something else, to move the goalpost, to change something else. And if you try to keep up with what is happening, I'm telling you, as a person who reads often 3 to 4 hours daily, whether I'm at work or not at work, not on the clock, of course, but whether it's a day of work or not, like if I have to be at work at 7 or 8, that means I'm up at 3. As a person who has read 3 to 4 hours daily for the past 4 years, if I say the news is going fast, and the enforcer is a reader as well, he is an avid reader, listens to NPR, is very well informed, you guys don't need to be distracted with a lot of what is going on. Even if you feel like it's going to affect your grandparent or whatever. Deal with things that you absolutely have to, if you have to. Don't go trying to protest everything, rallying around every single thing, because you might miss precious time in getting your ducks lined up in a row to understand the moves you need to make as an individual, because you're focused on what's being broadcast on the news. It's a cycle that unfortunately some folks have already begun, and it's a downward spiral for many, many, many people, because the things which have been done, some of them are hurtful to a lot of people, and I'm not taking that away from them. I'm very empathetic, but I realize that as a Christian, we have a larger obligation and we have an assignment, and so we cannot move off of the assignment, whatever it is, because that's when we lose whatever God's desired outcome is for our life. Unfortunately, if we focus on whatever is going on in the world around us, we're in the world, we're not of it. Again, if you're not a Christian, this is not for you. But if you are, you realize what I'm saying. It's ever more present daily. I mean, it's even more relevant every single minute of the day. If you look at tragedy, how many people have died because of this, and how much is going on because of that, and even in different cities and corners, rural America, urban America, doesn't matter. Tragedies are happening throughout the country every week. And if we look at every isolated news event as catastrophic and affecting us when some of it doesn't, we will get caught in the hee-haw or the seesaw of the news cycle. So I agree with that. Thank you.
I think maybe this should be or could be the topic for a future Dr. Princess show around smoke screens and information and things of that nature. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about, I don't know if this is a smoke screen. I think that's possibly, why I mentioned what I mentioned as far as being vigilant and asking yourself the question, is this a smoke screen or what's going on? Because I was watching an interview that Amanda Gorman, who used to be our nation's poet laureate, was giving. I think it was maybe on CBS or NBC, or I can't remember. But basically, they were talking to her about how she felt about having her book banned. And I was like, what could possibly have been in her book of poetry that it ended up on this banned list, right? So I don't know if that's a smokescreen, but it's stories like that that make you stop for a minute and say, what is really going on here? I think that would be a very important conversation to have, because this is only going to keep happening. And the interesting thing is that these curveball, smoke screens, or whatever you want to call them, can be even personalized if you think about it. Some are going to hit some people a certain way, and some are going to hit others another way, and some are going to hit collectively. So we're just in as you mentioned, we're in an era of information overload, which is a tactic to keep us in a specific place.
And if you're a Christian, you understand the scripture, God is not the author of confusion. You should not further question who's behind this. I'm sorry, I gotta call a spade a spade. Some of you people, regardless of how you look, you're confused because you'll see the same people who seem to be agents of chaos and doing things that devastate you and your families allegedly, but you'll see them go to a prayer breakfast or a prayer meeting or get close to a Bible or a priest, and you'll go, well, they have to be a believer too. I mean, some of you need to take the mud off of your eyes and see who's behind this, and it is not God. So neither is it a servant of God, okay? So if you need more clarity on that, then we're going to direct you toward a few scriptures, maybe at the beginning of next episode, or in my, actually I'll type them in when I drop the video. I'll type them in the description. Scriptures that you can use to help you anchor on to what God is about and what the fruit of the Spirit are. So if you're not seeing love, joy, peace, patience, / long-suffering, temperance, goodness, gentleness, if you're not seeing the 9 fruit, then you don't have to look further. You should know who's really behind the scenes on this. Anyhow, that's our time for today. Thank you for joining us. I know it was a little longer than I initially expected it to be, but I appreciate you all rocking with us. And if you want to continue to get your information from us, please like, share, subscribe. We will not be showing our faces. Myself, neither any of my guests. We are an anonymous channel, but you can still support us, spread the word, and thank you for joining us. Have a great day.